Hello fellow investors, today we're gonna talk about how to invest in Asia using Nordnet. With me as usual I have Marcus.
Hello.
And I'm Lucas. And we're gonna talk about first how to find funds on Nordnet which you can invest in order to invest in Asia, and more importantly, or maybe not more importantly, but they're going to be mainly focused around China, so that's important to be aware of. And we're also going to show you how to set it up automatically with Nordnet so that you can automate your investments in order for you to not have to worry about it and not have to think about it, which is usually a good...
And do it manually every time.
Exactly, so you don't have to do it manually every time.
Yeah. And one thing more to mention is that we already actually did a video about Nordnet earlier where we go through some of the basics. But in this particular video, we're going to focus how you can invest in a certain area, in this case in Asia, which I think a lot of investors are looking into right now, and they really want to get positions in this area. But we will also cover at the end some pros and cons that we feel you can relate to this area and how you should think when investing into Asia in general.
Yeah, so you definitely want to stick around for that part because it's important to be aware of some of the risks and some of the opportunities that comes with the territory.
It might be a bit more nuanced than people think, I think.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so let's dive right into it. So right now, here on the screen, you're gonna see my own personal Nordnet account. Not any huge sums, I know, but as you know, we're still new at this, not even a year in, so I'm pretty happy with everything. And this is, as usual, the last month. More details on this in our previous Nordnet video, so I'm not gonna jump into it here. This is what you're gonna look at when you log into your own Nordnet page. So first, in order to find the right So first, in order to find the right fund, you're gonna go at Börsit ja Markkinat, which is the markets.
Sadly, everything is in Finnish again because we're using the Finnish version of Nordnet where you can't switch the language for whatever reason.
Yeah, and this is just
annoying.
This is just a problem if you live in Finland, not otherwise. So in the other Nordnet versions, you can switch it to English. Okay, so rahastot, that's funds. Gonna go here. Then when it comes to funds that specifically track Asia, there's two I can recommend, because those are the only two so far that I've used, so I'm not going to recommend anything that I haven't used yet. One is Nordnet's own. It's quite new, but it's done really well so far. It's this Nordnet Indeksi Kehittyvät Markkinat. As you can see, it's less than a year old. So that's one, we're going to take a look at that. And the other one is the SPMP, or SPP has another one as well. This is a Swedish investing company. And it's this emerging markets. Similarly, it's less than a year old. The fees are a little bit higher, but nothing crazy.
Yeah, that's not too steep. And what is important to notice just here is that this is the developing market. So this is not specifically China, but China is usually included in a lot of these funds.
Yeah, that's a really good point that you took up. So here you can actually see geographically how the investments or how the funds are spread, how they have bought their shares basically. I don't know, I have a speech impediment today, I'm sorry about that, guys. Okay, so as you can see, the vast majority is in Asia, and it's in the developing parts of Asia. So India is included in this, which I love to see, and China, of course. But you also gonna see Central America and South America, and even some of Europe. So that's important to keep in mind. So this is a really good, actually, if you want to invest globally, but not in the States, Africa, or Australia, and
Europe,
the western parts of. If you invest in the global funds, they mostly track America and western part of Europe, and I guess Australia to some extent.
And sometimes China now as well, but I would say like mostly if it says global, a lot of the time it's really just America.
Yeah, it's really like the Western world, I would say. So this is kind of the opposite side of the coin. You get more here.
Yeah. One thing that I just noticed here right off the bat is that Samsung is apparently part of this, which is a bit confusing to me to an extent, because I wouldn't really consider South Korea a developing market. It's more of a developed market.
Yeah,
I guess that there might be, but I guess it's just like to capture all of Asia. I mean, there are certainly parts in Asia that are quite developed already, but this fund captures those as well.
Yes, but that's a good observation. But here you get to see some of the main corporations that this fund include. Alibaba is great to see. I think there's huge growth potential there. One of the leaders in AI in the world. Also Tencent, similarly, leader in AI. Just like, and that's not their main thing, but that's just one thing to keep in mind. Let's not spend too much time here. Here's just a quick overview in what kinds of technology the fund is invested in. And here, I think this is really important as well to keep in mind. Here's the fees, the running fees each year. Okay, let's jump quickly into SPP. We're not going to spend too much time here because it's going to be basically the same. You're going to have a bit higher fees, as I said already, quite new as well. But as you can see already in the last 3 months, 13% growth, which is absolutely insane. It's been, of course, Corona year, so in general this year has been absolutely crazy. But here you're gonna recognize a lot of the main companies. So
interestingly, Samsung is actually absent here.
Yeah.
So this might be more actually developing countries, but I'm not sure about that.
Yeah. Okay. So now you know. Now you have to remember what's the name of the fund, or at least like part of what the name of the fund is. To do the next step. The next step is if you wanna, like, you can buy it instantly here. Here is Osta, which means buy. So you can buy it directly from here. But if you wanna go on to the next step and automate it, this is how you're gonna do that. You're gonna go at Palvelut, which is services. Go to Kuukausisäästäminen, which is monthly savings. Scroll down a little bit. Aloita kuukausisäästäminen rahastoihin. So begin monthly saving into funds. You will here, this is why you have to remember at least some of what it's called. So here you're gonna have to write in, for example, Nordnet, if that's the one you choose, since it has lower fees. Take that one, or maybe you wanna take both, that's possible as well. Then you can just do it like this, SPP there, emerging markets. And here you take your sum, this is gonna be blurred out.
That's the holdings account, I guess, where you are taking it from.
Yeah, so this is my main holdings account, which I transfer my money to from my main bank. And then here I choose the sum, let's say 50 euros, and it's going to be divided equally between two. I can also change these percentages. It has to be at least 15 in each though, since this is the
15 euros, yeah.
15 euros, since that's the smallest sum. And here you can choose which date you want to invest it in the month. So maybe the 5th. And finally, one last thing. In order to get the money from your bank into Nordnet, you're gonna want to click on this little blue thing. This was hard for me the first time. I like somehow missed it. Maybe it's because the site is in Finnish and I'm a bit like, I get dyslexic when I try to read Finnish sometimes. So here, then it's tilisiirto, which is like normal bank transfer, not the real time. And then it's gonna be, now again I'm gonna have to blur these parts out, but it's tilisiirto here. How do I make a bank transfer? And here you're gonna find Nordnet's own bank account numbers. You're gonna take the one which to make it easier for them and to make the process faster, you wanna take the same bank that you signed up for when you signed up for Nordnet. So the one you usually use if you have
for instance, money. If you signed up to Nordnet with Nordea, for instance, you could transfer the money from a Nordea account, which would make it faster.
Yes, thank you, Marcus. Exactly like that. And so this is gonna be the bank number then. And then finally down here, this is gonna be blurred, but here you're gonna find the reference number under here, but I'm gonna blur that out. Okay, any questions, Marcus? Do you think that this was quite clear?
Yeah, I think it's pretty clear. And once again, if you want more details, you can always check our other Nordnet video where we also go through some of these details.
Or you can ask them in the comments. I'll be sure to respond to any comments and questions. So let's move on to a really important part as well, considering some of the pros and cons with investing into Asia and more specifically China, I think is the main part.
Which I think that is something that a lot of people are interested in right now, especially when you are looking at investor boards or forums and stuff like that. A lot of people are talking about China and Chinese companies, and that you really have to diversify into China and get positioned there because there are so many possibilities. But we are just gonna spend a few minutes now to see what we think about that.
Yeah, so take it away, Marcus.
Yeah, so we're gonna look at the pros and cons of this China approach, because obviously there's a lot of sense into investing into China that otherwise people wouldn't be talking so much about it. I mean, obviously it's everybody knows that China is growing immensely right now. It's challenging the US to be the biggest economy in the world, if it's not already. Maybe it is by the time you're watching this video.
Yeah.
So of course there's going to be massive opportunities in the largest economy in the world, and people really want to capture some of this, and quite as early as possible. Then they want to invest in the companies that's going to capture a lot of this growth. So there are great opportunities in China in general, and there are a lot of companies that could very well expand out of China even. And we know that China has massive export capabilities. They're producing most of the things we're using here in the West as well. So of course, if companies are going to start making things by themselves in China, it's really a good idea to jump on board right now while there's still a lot of opportunities and opportunities to make a lot of money when the shares rise eventually. Another thing I noted as well is that, like, there are a lot of competitors in China that have competitors in the West. For instance, NIO and Tesla, and computer manufacturing, what have you, all kinds of companies that already exist in the West, but now they are also entering into China. A lot of the times it seems that in China these companies are not valued as highly right now, and they certainly have a lot of more room to grow. That's why I think a lot of people want to almost shift some of their money from their current Western position into the Chinese position, because they expect that position to grow way more than the one they have in the West, which might be already developed by now. So what we're seeing, as far as I see it, is that there are a lot of high risk, high reward scenarios in China where you can, and we're gonna go way more into that on the con side, because I also have this point on the con side, that there are a lot of opportunities to make a lot of money in China, for instance, and relatively quickly, I guess. But you can never be really sure what you're doing or what to expect from China, which we're going to go more into with the cons. But finally, I would also like to add to the diversification, which I think that we really looked on in this video, how you invest into Nordnet. And one of the great things you can do is really track a fund, which would make it way more safer to invest into emerging markets than picking individual stocks, which is actually what a lot of people are doing. We are going to go into a great example, I think, of that on the con side. But do you have anything to add on the pros?
One thing with the high risk, high reward scenarios that you were talking about, and you said that you can't really know in the same way what you're doing. I think I would like to clarify that and say that I think maybe what you meant was that you don't have the same guarantees as you have in more of the traditional, or is that a good way of saying that?
I think so, in a lot of sense, because I think it's more of a question you're not really sure what you're getting, which we are, once again, we really should discuss them at the same time with the cons. But if you move on over to the cons, I think I can. There's a larger potential for scams, for instance, when you're going to China. I think we have all heard about the companies in China, for instance, that get noted in the US, but there are actually no value behind these companies. They are only living on the China hype, that people want to invest into China. But for instance, that when people are investing into this up-and-coming company that they think are going to do great, they actually just find like a heap of rubble and good papers to back it up. But when they are actually examined, there's nothing behind it. And these are a lot of the risks you're taking when you're investing into China, at least right now. I think that that is the high risk, high reward scenario. Is that if you find a genuine company that is doing really great, which we mentioned a few earlier in the video, for instance, Tencent, Alibaba, well, obviously Samsung and Taiwan Semiconductor Company, all of these are great, but they are already kind of discovered. People also try to find like undervalued Chinese companies, and a lot of the time these turned out to be complete hoaxes and there was nothing backing it up. This is not as much a chance to find yourself in when you're investing into the West, but it can of course happen, but it's way harder to pull off than it was in China. So you should really be careful when investing into, for instance, penny stocks in China. I would never.
Jesus.
There's a massive chance that you're just getting ripped off. I would at least look at the more established ones, but then there's also the fact that these might be even overvalued, and I didn't actually put it down here as the con, but there is a massive hype around China, and that a lot of these are only, the value behind them might not even be backed up, but what is actually happening, because there's just so much hype that people are wanting to put money into these markets when there might not actually be anything backing it up. For instance, some people are worried about NIO that makes electric cars, that it's actually just that people are looking at Tesla, and some people would argue also that Tesla is overvalued. But in that case, NIO is certainly overvalued, because if you look at their balance sheet, it hasn't really produced to the amount that, it has not really performed to the extent that it's valued at right now, and it's certainly around the hype. But then again, we come into the government actions, which make it a lot more difficult, and why I personally would not buy stocks into China. I would stick to funds, and that is that like government actions can, on a moment's notice, flip everything around to an extent that it's not really usually anyway happening in the West. For instance, we mentioned Alibaba earlier, and currently Alibaba is actually under antitrust allegations under the Chinese government. So they have put antitrust claims against Alibaba. Nobody knows really how this is going to pan out, but like Lucas said to me earlier today, is that you can really see it in their share price that it dropped a lot, because nobody really knows what's going to happen, because like the laws are not at all the same in China as it is in the West. For instance, like if the Chinese government says something, that happens, whatever it is. So we don't really know what's going to happen, and there's so much insecurity based on these government actions. I mean, to an extent, you can also say that corruption is the same thing, which a lot of other emerging markets are really struggling with. That there's massive corruption allegations. But in China specifically, I think it's more of following the Communist Party, and that the companies are very limited in a sense, more so than they are perhaps in the West by this Communist Party. We don't know how this is going to play out in the end, because certainly the government in China has been pushing some companies, for instance NIO, more than others, and you don't really know what's going to happen with all of this. And that's why, for me personally, I don't really look so well on China right now, because I just deem it to be too much risk that is you cannot really find it in any way. Like at least with Western companies, you can sometimes look through the balance sheet and all of this stuff, and at least get some idea of, okay, what am I actually investing into? But when it comes to China, you really have no idea, because the government can switch around the next day and say that, well, now we are gonna nationalize this company, for instance, and now it's not even a private company anymore. And I do not think that China will protect investor interests that much, particularly foreign investors.
No, and I think this is a great point, and it's something like I can be extremely naive sometimes, which is great that I have Marcus with me, because I not really, even though I was aware of it at least to some extent, I didn't really realize what that actually meant in practice. Like he explained, it's sort of an unprecedented, at least at the moment, unpredictability that you won't see in any Western markets. The fact that Alibaba and any other Chinese corporation really have to sort of bend the knee to the government at a moment's notice always is kind of something. As you said, that if something happens, then the chances that China's government is going to care about you as an individual investor is, let's just say, slim to none. And I'm an extreme optimist in any case, and even I am like, nah, I don't think that's going to play out in my favor. So I think this is a really, really important thing to keep
Yeah.
in mind, especially if you, like us, like long-term investments more than like just doing a quick swing trade or something like that. And since the very nature of how we invest is long-term and that we want to keep things sometimes for several years, these two don't go well together at all.
No. You're exposing yourself to a massive risk of government action, for instance.
Yes.
And of course, once again, everything ties together in a sense, because like you said, there's really no chance that the Chinese government is going to protect you as an investor, because like we said earlier, there was a massive problem with scams in China, for instance, where they set up these fake companies that we discussed earlier, and the Chinese government didn't really do much about it, to be honest. They did not try to prevent it in any massive way. We also know that China is known for making rip-offs of Western products without really paying any mind to trademarks or anything like that. So they really don't have a really good track record with like caring about foreign interests in that regard. So this is a massive part of why I personally wouldn't invest like directly into China, because there's just too much risk and not tied with how the company is actually doing, but with what is happening in that society in general. And that is what I do not like. Certainly there's always this risk in the Western world as well, but it feels that you could see it more coming here than you ever could in China, particularly because we are not exposed to the Chinese community or the society. We don't know anything, at least personally I don't know anything about that. So I'm not confident in putting away at least even any significant amount of money in stocks in this area in that sense.
Yeah.
That's why I would do what we did in Nordnet and invest into funds that would track the overall growth instead.
Yeah. But those are still susceptible, at least to some extent, to the same problems there. But this is really one of those scenarios where it's like you risk to lose everything, but the potential upside is big, like you said as well. I could easily see like great Asian stocks like multi-xing your investments over a period of years, but then you have to so it's probably something you want to expose your portfolio to, but to a lesser extent.
Yeah, diversifying into it to an extent, but maybe on a fund front I wouldn't really buy a lot of, because like a lot of people wanted to buy Alibaba, for instance, and I won't say anything about that. I haven't bought any Alibaba stock myself. I might not as well, but a lot of people are saying that they want to buy it. But now Alibaba got hit with the antitrust, and we don't know what's going to happen now. So this is always a risk when you're investing into China, and we're just going to see how that pans out.
Yeah. And this is something that only time will tell, so it's going to be very interesting to see in the future. But
usually time is on your side as an investor. But it feels like when you're investing into China, it might not actually be, because there's just a bigger chance that something is going to, mess with you.
So here's one thing I think Jesper came with so many great insights on our last episode, and it's really a great one. It's a shame that I couldn't optimize it better for search, but it's a real, there's a lot of gold nuggets there. But one of the things he mentioned was this concept of, instead of trying to get onto the gold rush, that you invest into, you buy shovels and sell it to the people who want to do that. I think there might be a possibility of doing that here as well, in terms of companies who expose themselves, like Western companies who expose themselves more to the developing markets. In terms of, a good example that just comes to mind now is maybe Beyond Meat, even though I haven't bought into that stock at all, and this is not a recommendation for Beyond Meat in itself, but they recently got their products into Asia and China in particular, and that's just sort of an example of trusted companies that find a way to utilize the sudden growth in Asia and the sudden influx of money into Asia. I think that's maybe a safer way to indirectly invest into Asia when you can find that. It's going to be a lot harder than just investing into big Asian companies, but if you can find that, I think that could also be a great way to minimize the risk while also trying to maximize the rewards. What do you think of that?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Now, I think we've covered all of the main things for this video, so if you don't have anything more to add, Marcus.
Not really. Once again, remember to always be cautious when investing into emerging markets. There's a lot of absolutely fantastic opportunities, but sometimes there's not really the facts to back it up. So always be careful, especially if you're an investor with low amounts of investable income. I wouldn't put too much of that into very high risk stocks.
Yes, agreed. Okay, but with that, please let us know what you thought of the episode in the comments. Invest into the like button and tap that. Yeah, deposit a subscribe. That's how it goes. And I guess with that, all that's left to say is happy investing.
Happy investing, guys.